Hello and welcome to the 7th broadcast of the Nerdflix podcast. Today, continuing our 5-part Star Wars series with part 3, we are covering the prequels, Star Wars A Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. So let's get started. Hey, it's time for Nerdflix! Welcome to the Nerdflix podcast. We'll start off by talking about The Phantom Menace, the prequel to a series of movies that was thought to be over. And now, in 1999, they're giving it a prequel, Star Wars The Phantom Menace, with the Jedi's Qui-Gon Jinn and a young Obi-Wan Kenobi and an even younger kid named Anakin Skywalker, with our villain being Darth Maul. We also meet Padme Amidala and the ever-annoying Jar Jar Binks. And this movie really brings back a series that was thought to be over in a prequel fashion. People were so excited for this movie, and in fact, at the time, movie theaters reported that 75% of people who bought a ticket left the movie after they played the trailer for the Phantom Menace. They would literally buy a full-price ticket, go into the theater, and then after seeing the trailer for Phantom Menace, leave. 75% of people at the time in the movie theater would do that. That's how excited people were for this movie. This movie also kicks off Ewan McGregor's series as playing Obi-Wan Kenobi. And actually, when he started the movie with lightsaber battles, he would actually make lightsaber noises during the battles. And they noted this, and they had to edit it out in the final cut. But if it weren't for the final cut, Obi-Wan Kenobi would be making unnecessary lightsaber noises in the movie. This movie is so full of special effects and CGI. I mean, it is chock full. In fact, there's only one scene in the movie where no CGI can be seen at all. It's ridiculous how much CGI and special effects this whole thing has, but it was a pretty good movie. But only one scene in it didn't have special effects. In this movie, this is when we meet the Jedi Council, leading all the Jedi on Coruscant. And one of the members of the Jedi Council is named Yaddle and looks very similar to Yoda. But the design for Yaddle was actually the original design for the younger version of Yoda. So the next time you happen to be watching that and if you can catch Yaddle in the background in the Jedi Council, that's what Yoda was originally supposed to look like. Now, everyone knows Jar Jar Binks, the annoying CGI character who looks really ridiculous, and he's really unnecessary to the plot, but his original idea, for Jar Jar Binks, would have been a lot more annoying and looked a lot more ridiculous. He was originally supposed to be green and looked more like an alligator, and it would have been a lot more ugly and a lot more annoying to have the CGI character that looked like a green alligator standing on 2 legs, just following around Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. So the next time you complain about Jar Jar Binks, remember what he could have looked like. One of my favorite things about The Phantom Menace is its E.T. Easter egg. Very hard to see, but if you can find it, it's super cool. It's in the scene with the Galactic Senate, and the camera pans over all the little pods that each representative has from each galaxy, each planet. And one of them, if you look very closely, has some little E.T. people jumping up and down in it and clapping. And these people are confirmed to be a reference to the E.T. movie. And these people are later classified as, now I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, Azogians. Azogians. I don't even know how to say it. It's just, they give them a species name. Here it is, it's Asogians. And so now, I guess we know E.T.'s species, and this is an Easter egg, but it's a fun Easter egg that makes it tie into Star Wars, and it's super cool. The next movie we're going to cover is the second prequel movie, Star Wars Attack of the Clones, where we finally see those clone troopers right now working on the good guy side working along the Jedi, and they're all clones. They're all clones of the bounty hunter Jango Fett, the father of Boba Fett. And so we finally meet the clones, and they show up to help out the Jedi. This movie had an excessive number of the Star Wars clone troopers, but no actual clone trooper costume was ever actually completed. All of the clone troopers being CGI, and the people acting it out with the green screen suits were only wearing helmets and sometimes the footwear of the clone troopers, but there was never a full clone trooper piece of armor and a full clone trooper costume ever fully completed. Remember earlier when I talked about Ewan McGregor making lightsaber noises the first time he acted in a Star Wars movie? Well, now in Attack of the Clones, when Hayden Christensen starts playing Anakin Skywalker, he has to be reminded multiple times by George Lucas to stop making lightsaber noises. Every time he gets a lightsaber in his hand and he's directed to swing it around, he just starts making those lightsaber noises, and I would too. One of the things to consider about Attack of the Clones is that we do see a young Boba Fett, and it is cool to consider what Boba Fett might be learning from this experience that he'll be using in future films such as Empire Strikes Back. One of them being is that in the scene in which Obi-Wan gets in his ship and he's running from Jango Fett and a young Boba Fett is in Jango Fett's ship with him watching, Jango Fett gets fooled by Obi-Wan Kenobi hiding on the backside of an asteroid, and Jango Fett thinks he blew him up. And Boba Fett was obviously there watching the whole thing. And in Empire Strikes Back, the Millennium Falcon tries to attach to the side of a Star Destroyer so that they can be undetected by the Imperials. But once they take off and they start heading for Cloud City, that's when we see Boba Fett is following them. Because Boba Fett learned from his experience in Attack of the Clones and learned to be aware of possible ships hiding behind things because it fooled his dad. Around the same area when Obi-Wan and Jango Fett are facing off, Jango Fett gets in his ship and bumps his head or his helmet off the overhead control panel. And that was on purpose. That was not a mistake. It was a hint to A New Hope where a stormtrooper bumps his head off the top of a doorway. And it's a pretty funny hint considering that watching a stormtrooper bump his head off the top of a doorway was pretty funny because that was an accident, but Jango Fett doing that was not an accident. It was a subtle hint to the classic mistake in A New Hope. This movie had a lot more Jedi than the last movie, mostly because of the scene when they're in the arena fighting battle droids and there's tons of Jedi. And most actors were allowed to pick and customize the handle of their lightsaber and the color of the lightsaber. It's actually kind of funny because some people are going crazy and theorizing about why Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber, but it's really just because Samuel L. Jackson, the guy who plays Mace Windu, asked if he could have a purple lightsaber, and George Lucas was like, sure. But all the actors were allowed to design and pick out their lightsabers, except for Hayden Christensen, because he played Anakin Skywalker and needed a very, very specific lightsaber, the one that matches Luke's, because Obi-Wan gives Luke the lightsaber saying it belonged to his father, so everyone could customize except for Hayden Christensen because he played the role of Anakin Skywalker. In this movie we see the Jedi Archives where Obi-Wan goes to do some studying, and he finds the archives are incomplete. But these Jedi Archives are set to resemble Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. And if you look closely and you hold up a picture of it, it looks Star Wars-y, but the overall shape and the way it's set up resembles Trinity College in Ireland. The final movie we'll talk about today is Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith, the third and final prequel movie where a lot of stuff happens. Anakin goes bad, Palpatine executes Order 66, which means the clone troopers are now turning to stormtroopers and are not on the good guys' side anymore. And the movie ends when Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. The original script for Revenge of the Sith was going to run about 4 hours long. The opening scene in which Anakin and Obi-Wan have to rescue Palpatine after Palpatine gets kidnapped ran almost for an entire hour. The movie was literally 4 hours long, and they had to cut a bunch of stuff to get it down to the time it is now. But originally, you would have been in that movie theater for 4 whole hours, and you thought Avengers Endgame was long. The Star Wars prequels have a lot of Easter eggs, like I mentioned earlier, E.T. being in The Phantom Menace. George Lucas put his children in a lot of his movies, and in Revenge of the Sith, he put himself in the movie. Very hard to see. His face is painted blue, and he's under a cloak, but he's in there alright. And one of the things that is also in Revenge of the Sith that is very hard to see, but if you catch it, it's pretty cool. It's an overhead shot of Coruscant, where ships are flying from all over the place. And one ship that's going to take a landing on a docking bay is none other than the Millennium Falcon, or a model similar to it. We're not sure if it is the Millennium Falcon, but it is a model similar to it, and it is there if you look very closely. Another thing in the original idea for the movie was to have a young Han Solo show up. We all know the young Han Solo from the Solo movie that came out in 2019, but originally a young Han Solo would have shown up in Revenge of the Sith, but that was cut along with a lot of other stuff from the movie to bring it down to a smaller size, and young Han was also cut from the movie. Revenge of the Sith is set to mimic Return of the Jedi, also being the last movie in the original trilogy. Revenge of the Sith is the last movie in the prequels, each coming out in 3 movie increments. So the name Revenge of the Sith is set to mirror Return of the Jedi. And like I talked about last week, Return of the Jedi was originally going to be called Revenge of the Jedi. So Revenge of the Sith is in one way using the idea of the word revenge in the movie, but also mirroring Return of the Jedi at the same time, because instead of a Jedi returning and saving the day, the Sith gets its revenge, and the movie ends on a very dark note, but it sets up the original trilogy. In the scene in which Obi-Wan and Anakin are lightsaber battling on the volcanic planet of Mustafar, there's all the volcanoes erupting, and there's lava flowing everywhere, and the shots of big volcanic eruptions and lava squirting everywhere weren't CGI. The lava itself was CGI, but the big eruptions were not. The big eruptions were actual film of a volcano erupting, because a volcano was actually erupting at the time of shooting the film. So if you watch that movie again and you see the big volcanic eruptions, those are real eruptions. In one of the space dogfight scenes, a ship blows up another ship, and that ship's debris ends up hitting the ship that blew it up. And that part of that debris, if you look closely, is a literal kitchen sink. The CGI people just put that in there as a joke, saying they were throwing everything in that scene but the kitchen sink. But the kitchen sink is in that scene. And if you look closely, it's very hard to see a lot of things. A lot of these fun Easter eggs you gotta look closely for, but it is worth it once you find it, because there's literal kitchen sink in Revenge of the Sith. In Revenge of the Sith, we visit a planet called Kashyyyk, where the Wookiees live. And actually, the young Han I talked about a little earlier, he was supposed to live amongst the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, but he doesn't in the final cut because he was cut out. But we still get the planet Kashyyyk, which is where all the Wookiees live and where the Wookiees come from. And the original idea for Kashyyyk was going to be used in Return of the Jedi. In Return of the Jedi, we visit the planet Endor, where the adorable little Ewoks live. But the Ewoks were originally supposed to be Wookiees, and Endor was originally supposed to be a planet of Wookiees. But that idea was cut because they thought Ewoks would make them a lot more in merchandise, and oh boy, they did. But they finally used the Kashyyyk Wookiee planet idea in Revenge of the Sith. Alright, that's all we have for this week. Thanks for listening. I hope you'll listen next week when we cover the 4th part of our 5-part Star Wars series, where we cover the sequels. So that's Star Wars The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. So I hope you listen to that, and thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you next week on the Nerdflix podcast.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Hey, Nerdflix is over.